Hello world, this is Lisa Fredrickson, your friend and professor from Johnson County Community College. And in this short screencast, we're going to continue on with our GPA calculations using the material we are learning in Chapter 2. If you have not watched the first YouTube that discussed Chapter 1 and how I've set up this exercise, you might want to go back and review that. The HTML is in blue, the JavaScript is in red, and we're going to create buttons to calculate our GPA using JavaScript and look at Chapter 2 where we start working with functions, data types, and operators. So our task is to write a function called GPA3, then add the JavaScript to an HTML event attribute such as onClick. When you click the instruction, the solution will be revealed. The HTML to create this button is shown here in blue. Its onClick event attribute is calling the GPA3 function. And when that GPA3 function is called, it's running this code that's in script tags in the HTML. This function only has one statement. It's a document.getElementById statement. It gets the GPAP3 for GPA paragraph 3 paragraph, sets its inner HTML property to my GPA is now 3.9. So let's see if it works when I click. Yes, the inner HTML property of this paragraph is set to the text string that was in my function. The interesting thing about this is we have wrapped our code in a function name, so I can merely call that function name from my onClick event. The cool thing about this is now I can call that function as many times as I want. I could have several buttons that run that same function, and I could take that code and put it in an external JavaScript file and call it from there as well. The second example, write a function GPA4, use a variable or two. We are calling the function from our onClick attribute of our button, and we're declaring a variable called GPAPara, setting an equal to the element by ID GPAP4. We're setting another variable to the desired text string, and then we're setting the variable called GPAPara, his inner HTML property, to the desired GPA. There's nothing different here from number 3 other than we're declaring a couple variables in our function. Now you don't have to code your JavaScript as I have on separate lines, but I think it makes it much more readable if you do. So I highly encourage you to put one statement per line so that you can see the closing semicolon. I also encourage you to put your opening and curly braces for your function name on their own line, because that just makes it easy to find them as well. Finally, notice that you can use either quotation marks, as I did in example 3, or apostrophes, as I'm using in example 4, when you're writing your JavaScript in a script, because you're not having to compete with the quotation marks that are already used in HTML syntax for attribute values. My fifth example is a little bit different because this function is going to take arguments. And arguments are simply variables that are passed to the function when you invoke it. So this time, when we invoke the function in our onClick event attribute, we'll have to pass a piece of information for each argument. And in this case, I'm passing the number of credits for the class as well as the number of points I've earned for the class. And a point is calculated as the number of credits times the grade equivalent. So for example, in this case, I'm getting 12 points for a 4-credit class, so I must have gotten a B in the class because a B is worth 3.0. So 4 credits times a 3.0 would give me 12 points for that class. In this case, when we define the function, we also define the arguments that we're going to pass to it. And then we use those arguments in the statements of the function. So in this case, we're declaring another variable result as the points divided by the credits. So if I pass 4 and 12, it's going to be 12 divided by 4, which is going to give me a result equal to 3. And then my final statement is document.getElementById GPAP5, which is this paragraph. Set its inner HTML property to my GPA is now, and then concatenate the result, and then concatenate after passing arguments. Let's see if it works. So here we're finally doing a little bit of calculation. We're actually dividing the points by the credits. So this function is just to show you that you can pass arguments to a function when you call it. Number 6, write a function GPA6, then add the JavaScript to an HTML event attribute such as onClick. Use window prompt to get the values of credits and points. So instead of passing 4 and passing 12, we're going to use window prompt to ask the user what is the value of credits and points. And so the script looks very similar, except instead of passing credits and points, we're going to declare a variable and prompt the user for how many credits and how many points. I'm going to click my Calculate My GPA number 6 button. How many credits? Let's say I'm taking a 2-credit class. And how many points? Let's say I got an A in the class, so that would be 2 times a 4.0 would be 8 points, and I click OK. And this time my GPA after prompting is 4. Now that's more flexible because every time I click the button, I can calculate the GPA for a different class. So it's more flexible than just hard coding and passing in the arguments. However, sometimes prompting can be considered annoying on a web page. So let's try something even swifter. On number 7, we're going to use input boxes for our credits and our points. And so I'll say I'm taking a 2-credit class, and let's say I get a B. That would be 6 quality points. Let's calculate the GPA, and I got a 3.0 if I take a 2-credit class and I have 6 quality points. In this case, I'm doing the exact same math. I'm getting a result, which is the total points divided by the credits. 6 divided by 2 is going to be 3, but to get my credits and get my points, instead of passing them directly as arguments, and instead of prompting the user with window.prompt method, I'm using the document.getElementById and pulling out the value property of these input boxes. To create input boxes, you're going to need both a label element and an input element. And then, of course, you're going to have to ID that input element and speak to that ID when you reference that value in your JavaScript. Let's look at number 8. For the very first time, I'm separating all of my JavaScript out of my HTML. Up until example 7, we've always used the onClick attribute and set that to a JavaScript function. But that intermixing of HTML and JavaScript can be difficult to maintain. So a better way is to separate all my HTML and all of my JavaScript into 2 separate files, and then I can better maintain and reuse my external JavaScript file. So in this case, notice that there's no JavaScript being called when I click my Calculate My GPA number 8 button. I do not see an onClick attribute here. So we're really making headway in terms of separating our code. But let's see how this works. 2-credit class, 8 points. Let's say I've got an A, so I'm going to get 8 points. Here is the statement that then goes ahead and changes the inner HTML property of GPAP8. It's a statement right here, and it's changing its onClick property to the GPA8 function when that button is clicked. So I'm using the onClick event property in JavaScript to run this GPA8 function. Now, that is pretty cool because we've separated out all of our HTML and JavaScript. But an even better way would be to use an event listener. So number 9, which is the final thing that I want you to learn from Chapter 2, is how to use event listeners. And the event listener method has 3 arguments. My HTML and my JavaScript are all separated out. Again, I'm going to put in my 2-credit class. I got an A. I get 8 points there. And the reason why the event listener method is superior to the onClick property is because I can only assign one function to that onClick property. Whereas if I use an event listener on the click of button 9, here's button 9, on its click event, see I can run GPA 9, I can also run the end function, and I could have several more. So when you use event listeners, you can run as many functions as you want from the click of that button. You're not limited to simply one function being assigned to that property. So let me calculate my GPA number 9, and actually I'm being prompted because now we're running function the end. What is your name? Lisa. I'm going to click OK. And what does function the end do? It prompts for my name, and then it comes back and alerts me that whatever the variable your name is equal to is added to this text, you is smart. I'm going to click OK, and the GPA 9 function also ran. So I actually ran 2 functions based on clicking button number 9.